My name is Natalie Chen, 28 years old. If you asked anyone around me, they'd say I've always been the type who trusts my instincts. At work, I'm the one who can spot trends in a sea of numbers, the analyst who notices the patterns others miss. But what I didn't see, what I refused to see, was that the two people I trusted most had been weaving a lie right in front of me. For 3 years, I'd been with Joe. 2 of those years, we'd lived together in a downtown apartment sharing rent chores and the kind of quiet routines that trick you into believing you're building a future. He was funny sometimes, lazy, but charming, and I thought we were solid. Looking back, I realize how naive I was. Work was its own battlefield. I'm a data analyst at a mid-sized tech firm, a place where ambition is currency and loyalty is a gamble. For over a year, my boss, Lauren Finch, dangled the golden ticket of a promotion senior analyst. She was the kind of leader who walked into a room and owned it. Polished heels, sharp suits, a smile that could cut glass. People admired her. I admired her. I thought she was my mentor. But the promotion never came. Deadlines shifted. Promises got postponed. Every time I asked, she said next quarter. Natalie, keep pushing. I told myself patience was a virtue, but deep down my gut whispered I was being strung along. I ignored it because I wanted to believe. Then came that night. It started with something so ordinary. Joe had left his iPad on the coffee table. Nothing unusual, we often shared it for Netflix recipes, even calendars. But as I walked past the screen, lit up, a notification, a message from someone saved only as L. The preview text was short. She's still convinced that promotion is real. Poor little girl. I froze. My blood felt like it had drained straight out of my body. My hands went cold. There was only one person it could be. Lauren. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I don't regret it either. My fingers trembled as I opened the app. Joe's account was open, and the chat history stretched back 6 months. I started scrolling faster, then slower, forcing myself to read every word. It was like walking into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. It wasn't just the affair, though. The proof of their physical relationship was everywhere, shameless, littered with innuendos and plans for hotel rooms. No, what broke me was the contempt. Lauren and Joe mocked me like I was some pitiful character in a play they wrote together. They ridiculed my work ethic, the shirts I wore to the office, my hobbies, a birthday gift I'd spent weeks planning for Joe, laughed at in a few cruel lines of text. But the worst part, the part that hollowed me out, was the professional sabotage. Lauren had been feeding Joe confidential information about my performance reviews before I even saw them. She bragged about projects I was being considered for, then told him how she planned to assign them to someone else just to keep Natalie hungry. The promotion, the dream I was breaking myself for, a complete fiction, a carrot on a stick. One message burned itself into my memory so deeply I could almost hear her voice reading it aloud. Lauren. She's a good workhorse. Does the work of 2 people for the price of 1. Can't lose that, can we? I'll string her along until Q4 is done. Joe's reply. My hardworking girl. Just make sure she gets a big enough bonus to pay for that Italy trip I want. You can come meet us there, LOL. I was sitting on my couch, in the apartment where I paid 70% of the bills, reading the 2 people I trusted most, joking about bleeding me dry. I expected rage. I thought I'd scream, throw the iPad across the room, confront Joe right then. But instead, an icy calm settled over me, sharp and steady. It was almost terrifying how clear my mind became. This wasn't a problem for fists or screaming matches. This was surgery, and I would be the scalpel. So I acted. I spent the next hour methodically screenshotting everything. The texts, the professional sabotage, the mocking the evidence of confidential company data being shared. I saved each image, then uploaded them to 3 different cloud drives locked behind passwords only I knew. Joe was asleep in the next room, oblivious. I remember standing in the doorway for a moment, staring at him. My boyfriend, tangled in the sheets, breathing softly. He looked so harmless, so familiar, but the man I thought I knew no longer existed. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop. I remembered a phone call from a recruiter I'd brushed off a week ago, some other company wanting to set up an interview. At the time, I wasn't interested, but now it felt like a lifeline. I wrote the recruiter back. My fingers steady as stone. Yes, I'd like to move forward as soon as possible. Then I tailored my resume, fired off 5 more applications, and lined them up like bullets in a gun. The next morning, I poured coffee as if nothing had happened. Joe stumbled in, kissed my cheek, and left for his job. I smiled back, an actress playing her part to perfection. He didn't sense a thing. Inside, though, something in me had shifted permanently. The Natalie he thought he knew, the workhorse, the loyal girlfriend, the easy target was gone. And neither he nor Lauren had the faintest idea what was coming. The chat history stretched on for 6 months. 6 months of laughter at my expense. 6 months of Joe and Lauren using me as the punchline to their private comedy. The deeper I scrolled, the more grotesque it became. Lauren joked about my work clothes, that blouse she wore today, straight out of a clearance bin. She's smart with numbers, but clueless with style. Joe piled on without hesitation. She thinks it's professional. I swear she could walk into a boardroom and still look like she's headed to a PTA meeting. They laughed at my birthday surprise. I'd planned a quiet weekend getaway for Joe, complete with the vintage guitar he'd always wanted. In the chat, he told Lauren how he faked gratitude while secretly texting her under the dinner table. I forced myself to read every word. Every betrayal carved something out of me, but I wanted to feel the cuts, to remember them. And then came the messages that confirmed what I already feared. Lauren had sabotaged me, professionally, deliberately, gleefully. I told the execs Natalie wasn't leadership material. She's brilliant with spreadsheets, but she lacks presence. So I'm giving the Thompson account to Greg instead. That'll sting. Joe good. Don't let her get comfortable. The more she works, the more she'll cover our lifestyle. I stared at those words, bile rising in my throat. Our lifestyle. They were mocking me while using me as the engine for their comforts. But even as I read, a strange clarity rooted itself in me. My world had collapsed, but it hadn't destroyed me. It had sharpened me. There would be no screaming match. No dramatic midnight eviction. That's what Joe and Lauren would expect: messy emotions, chaos, weakness. Instead, I became still, cold, focused. I began screenshotting every thread, every cruel joke, every unethical line of confidential company data. I moved systematically, fingers steady, saving, labeling, backing up. I created folders in the cloud, mirrored copies across 3 accounts, encrypted them. By the time the sun rose, I had an ironclad archive. Not just proof of infidelity, but professional misconduct that could topple them both. I closed the iPad, gently placed it back where Joe had left it, and slipped into bed beside him. He stirred in his sleep, mumbling something incoherent. My eyes traced the curve of his jaw, the familiar shadow of stubble. How many nights had I brushed my fingers along that face, believing I was touching someone who loved me? I lay there until morning, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. By the next day, my plan was already in motion. At work, I sat in my cubicle, typing numbers into spreadsheets, while interviews lined up quietly in my inbox. I responded with professional enthusiasm, scheduling technical calls for the coming week. During lunch, Lauren strolled past my desk. Her perfume trailed behind her expensive commanding. She paused, gave me one of her practiced smiles. Natalie, we'll talk about your promotion soon. Q4 is coming up, and I want you in the running. I nodded, my face the picture of loyalty. Yes, Lauren. Looking forward to it. She walked away, heels clicking confidently across the tile. She had no idea I was already writing my escape route. At home, Joe lounged on the couch, flipping through a travel magazine. He looked up casually. Hey, babe, check this out. Italy. Imagine us there next summer. I forced a smile. Yeah, that would be nice. Inside, I was replaying the message he'd sent Lauren about the trip, about how my bonus would pay for their vacation. He thought I was still blind. That was his fatal mistake. The following days blurred into a double life. By morning, I brewed coffee, kissed Joe goodbye, and went to work like always. By night, I interviewed over Zoom, my camera angled perfectly, my voice steady. I was fueled not by anger, but by something sharper: vengeance wrapped in silence. The recruiters responded quickly. Within days, I had 2 competing job offers. One offered a 20% raise and remote flexibility. I accepted it on the spot. That night, while Joe watched TV, I sat at the kitchen table tailoring my resignation letter. The glow of my laptop reflected off my glasses, hiding the satisfaction in my eyes. I kept my composure flawlessly. To Joe, I was still the devoted girlfriend. To Lauren, I was still the loyal workhorse. But beneath the surface, a storm was building. And when it broke, it wouldn't be loud. It would be surgical. When the job offer letter hit my inbox, I didn't hesitate. 20% more pay. Remote flexibility. A title Lauren had mocked me for dreaming about. I signed my name and hit send. Just like that, my future was no longer chained to Joe or Lauren. The next morning, I walked into Lauren's office with a printed resignation letter in my hand. She was sipping her coffee, skimming through emails. "Morning, Natalie. What's up?" she asked without looking up. I placed the envelope on her desk. My 2 weeks' notice. Her head jerked up, eyes narrowing. For a moment, her polished facade cracked. Then the smirk returned. "Resignation. This is a surprise. We were just talking about your future here." I kept my tone flat controlled. A better opportunity came up. Too good to pass. Lauren leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs, studying me like I was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. "You know you're leaving a lot on the table. Promotions, long-term growth. Are you sure this is wise?" "I'm sure." Her smile tightened. She hated not having control, but she let me walk out without another word. That evening I told Joe over dinner, "I resigned today." His fork clattered against his plate. "You what?" "I quit my job. I've accepted another position." His voice shot up incredulous. Without asking me, "What about our plans, rent? You know I can't cover this place on my own." I sipped my water calmly. "I'll cover my share for another month. That gives you time to sort things out." A crucial truth hovered unspoken between us. The lease was in my name only. He didn't realize the ground he stood on was borrowed. Joe's face flushed red. "Unbelievable. You just decide this on your own. Do you even care about what we've built?" I looked at him evenly. Things change. It wasn't the screaming match he wanted. He wanted me flustered, defensive, guilty. My composure infuriated him. The next few days turned into a bizarre performance. At home, Joe sulked loudly, sighing theatrically, leaving overdue bills spread across the counter as though to guilt me. He left travel brochures on the table, banking apps open on his phone, little traps designed to tug at my sympathy. I gave him nothing. At work, Lauren retaliated in her own way. She loaded my desk with tedious, meaningless handover tasks, the kind of busy work meant to grind down a departing employee. In meetings, she jabbed at me with thinly veiled insults. Let's get Natalie's input while we still have her. Hopefully, her new company values loyalty. I kept my face neutral, jotting notes in my planner, as though her words slid past me like water. But inside, I cataloged every slight, every manipulation. They would all serve me later. Meanwhile, I began the quiet exodus. Each night, while Joe watched TV in the living room, I packed a box of my essentials, clothes, documents, a few sentimental keepsakes. I stacked them neatly in my trunk and drove them to a small storage unit across town. When Joe asked, I told him I was decluttering, making space for when you find a roommate. He bought it. He thought he was still in control. But my silence was louder than any argument. He started prodding, desperate to crack me. One night, he cornered me in the kitchen, tears brimming in his eyes. "I know I've been distant, Nat. I made a mistake. Just a brief emotional thing with someone else. But it's over. It meant nothing." His voice broke on the word mistake, rehearsed just enough to sound raw. I stared at him, my expression blank. "I'm sorry you feel that way." His frustration flickered, then hardened. He wanted me to explode, to beg, to forgive. Instead, my indifference burned hotter than rage. The double life took its toll, but it also gave me a strange power. Joe thought I was blind. Lauren thought I was loyal. But in reality, both were dancing on a clock I was winding down second by second. And soon the silence would end. By the second week of my countdown, their masks began to slip. Lauren first. She called me into her office, closed the door, and softened her tone. Gone was the clipped, commanding boss. In her place was the mentor. "Listen, Natalie," she began, voice low, sympathetic. "I think you're making a mistake. I spoke with the higher-ups. That promotion we discussed. We can fast-track it. End of the quarter, it'll be official, plus a 5% raise. How does that sound?" Her eyes searched mine, the faintest edge of desperation glinting behind her practiced smile. A 5% raise. The same pathetic breadcrumbs she and Joe had laughed about in their texts. I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, schooling my features into polite consideration. "I appreciate the offer," I said evenly, "but my decision is final. My new role is a significant step forward." Her smile froze just for a heartbeat. Then she smoothed it back into place. "Well, good luck then. I hope you don't regret it." Her eyes said what her mouth didn't trade her. At home, Joe tried his own performance. He came to me one evening, eyes red, shoulders slumped. Real tears this time, or at least convincing ones. "I don't know what's happening to us," he whispered, voice trembling. "I messed up, Nat. I got close to someone else, but it's done. It meant nothing. I was just scared about you quitting, about our future." He reached for my hand. His palm was clammy. I studied him, this man I thought I knew. The man who mocked me with Lauren while using me to fund his lifestyle. I felt nothing, no fury, no grief, just emptiness. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said softly, withdrawing my hand. The flicker of frustration that crossed his face was unmistakable. My non-reaction was maddening for him. He wanted me to fight, to plead, to give him something to twist into leverage. Instead, I gave him silence. But Joe wasn't done. The next day he came home feigning casualness. I talked to Lauren, he said, setting his keys down. She told me she offered you the promotion. She really wants you to stay. She says you're a huge asset. The audacity was staggering. To use her, my saboteur, as his character witness. I nodded once, pretending to absorb it, then turned back to my laptop without a word. Inside, my resolve solidified into steel. By now, my evidence was nearly complete. Every night, I arranged the screenshots into a single PDF file, chronologically ordered, each damning message highlighted, annotated. Lauren's admissions of manipulation. Joe's complicity. The confidential data leaks. It wasn't just gossip, it was a professional record of misconduct that no HR department could ignore. As I scrolled through the finished draft one last time, a strange calm washed over me. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to destroy anything with my own hands. All I had to do was wait. 9 days down, 4 to go. The masks were cracking, and soon they'd shatter. On my last morning at the company, I carried in a small cardboard box. A plant, a framed photo, a few books, nothing more. Someone had brought in a sheet cake that read, "Good luck, Natalie," in cheap blue frosting. Lauren made a grand show of cutting the first slice and handing it to me with her polished smile. "No hard feelings, right?" she said sweetly, placing the plate in my hand. "Corporate world is tough. You gotta look out for number 1. I met her eyes and gave a small, unreadable smile. "You have no idea how right you are." The hours crawled by as I wrapped up documentation, answered emails, and helped teammates with handovers. If anyone glanced my way, they would have seen an overly helpful employee leaving on the best of terms. At 2:45 p.m., a calendar alert popped up on my screen, exit interview, HR 3:00 p.m. My pulse steadied. This was the moment. Gloria, the HR director, sat behind her desk, glasses perched low on her nose. She was in her 50s, a woman who radiated both weariness and authority. She began with the script she'd probably read 100 times. "So, Natalie, why are you leaving?" I gave my rehearsed answers smoothly. A role came up that better aligns with my long-term goals. I've learned a lot here, and I'm grateful for the experience. She typed as I spoke, nodding detached. "And is there anything else you'd like to add?" she asked, already reaching to close her folder. "Yes," I said. The word cut through the air like a blade. Gloria looked up, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "My decision to leave is the direct result of a hostile and unethical environment created by my manager, Lauren Finch." Her posture straightened immediately. "Those are very serious allegations, Natalie." "I know," I said. My voice was calm, deliberate, and I have documented proof. I unlocked my phone, opened the drafted email, and attached the PDF I'd spent nights perfecting. My thumb hovered for only a second before pressing send. "The email is in your inbox now," I said. Gloria's eyes flicked to her monitor. Silence filled the room, except for the quiet clicking of her mouse as she opened the file. She scrolled and scrolled. I watched her expression shift, the slight widening of her eyes at the screenshots of confidential data, the tightening of her jaw at the fabricated promotion, the sharp inhale when she read the mockery of me woven into every exchange. Minutes passed. The weight of the silence was suffocating. Finally, she looked up. The HR mask was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper, a sentinel protecting the company from ruin. "Ms. Chen," she said, her voice clipped professional. "Thank you for presenting this in such a clear and documented manner. We take these matters extremely seriously. A full investigation will begin immediately. I can assure you this will not affect your references from this company." I nodded, rising from my chair. That's all I could ask for. We shook hands, her grip firm, her eyes still shadowed with shock. As I walked out carrying my box, I spotted Lauren across the office. She was laughing with another manager, her confidence radiating as always. She caught my eye, gave a little wave. "Good luck, Natalie." I nodded back, unreadable. She didn't know the guillotine was already hanging above her head. That evening I went home early. Joe was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone, bored. "You're home early," he said without looking up. "It was my last day," I replied, setting the box down by the door. "Oh, right." He returned to his screen, uninterested. I stood there studying him, the man who thought he had played me like a fool. The man who thought Lauren would shield him forever. My voice was quiet, but it sliced through the air. "Joe, I know about you and Lauren." The color drained from his face. The moment the words left my mouth, I know about you and Lauren Joe froze. His phone slipped slightly in his hand. For the first time in months, his easy confidence cracked. What are you talking about? His voice trembled. I stepped closer, calm, controlled. The messages, Joe, on the iPad. 6 months of them. Every joke, every plan, every word. His face drained of color. Then, as quickly as fear arrived, anger followed. You went through my private messages. That's insane, Natalie. That's a violation of my privacy. I let out a short, humorless laugh. And you think conspiring with my boss to sabotage my career wasn't a violation of mine? He stood pacing, raking his hands through his hair. You don't understand. Lauren, this wasn't serious. It just happened. You're blowing it out of proportion. Really, I tilted my head, my voice cutting like glass. Because from where I stood, it looked pretty serious. You mocked me. You planned vacations with her paid for with my bonus. You laughed while she stripped away opportunities I bled for. His chest heaved. His eyes darted, searching for an angle, a lifeline. Finally, he lunged for the only weapon left, pity. You can't just throw this all away, Nat. We've built a life here. We're good together. You love me. I looked at him, really looked. The man I had once believed was my partner, my future. All I felt now was the vast emptiness of betrayal. No, Joe, I loved who I thought you were. He dropped the act then. His voice rose jagged with desperation. You can't kick me out. I've got nowhere else to go. This apartment, the lease is in my name, only I cut him off. My tone was quiet but absolute. You have 3 days to pack your things. Sunday night, I want you gone. His eyes widened. You can't do this. I can, and I am. He tried one last card voice, shrill with panic. What did you do, Natalie? What did you do to Lauren? I met his gaze unblinking. The truth, with evidence. She's finished. The horror in his eyes was almost satisfying. His safety net, the woman who fed him, lies and power, was unraveling, and he knew it. He staggered back onto the couch, staring at me, as though seeing me for the first time. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, calculating the wreckage of his choices. You can't just end it like this, he whispered, his voice cracking. But I could, and I already had. I won't argue with you, Joe. I won't fight. But Sunday night I want you gone. That's final. I turned, walking toward the bedroom. Behind me, he sat in silence, the storm he created finally breaking over him. For the first time in months, I felt free. 2 months later, my life was quiet. The kind of quiet that used to terrify me. The kind that now felt like oxygen. I heard about the fallout through whispers and phone calls from old coworkers. Lauren had been placed on administrative leave the day after my exit interview. A week later, she was terminated for gross misconduct and breach of confidentiality. The official company memo used sterile words, but the gossip filled in the blanks. She didn't fight it. She couldn't. My dossier had been a guillotine blade, and she herself had tied the rope. Joe predictably didn't fare any better. In the 3 days I gave him, he cycled through every tactic: angry voicemails, tearful apologies, messages from mutual friends calling me heartless. By Sunday, he was throwing his clothes into duffel bags, muttering curses under his breath. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood in the doorway watching as he carried his life out of the apartment piece by piece. Later, I learned he had called Lauren for help. She told him to lose her number. She had her own mess to survive. The safety net he'd relied on was gone, and just like that, so was he. In the weeks that followed, I slowly reclaimed my space. I sold the overpriced espresso machine Joe had insisted we needed, $400 cash from a stranger on Facebook Marketplace. I used it to buy a huge armchair for my new apartment, a throne of sorts, where I could curl up with a book and remind myself of the power of saying no. It felt like my severance package. Work, too, was different. My new role challenged me in ways Lauren never allowed. My boss was the kind of woman who talked about her garden during Monday calls, who trusted her team instead of dangling false promises. For the first time in years, my energy went toward building, not surviving. And yet, not everything was easy. Some nights I sat alone in that armchair and felt the hollow ache of loss. Not for Joe, not even for Lauren's validation, but for the years I had poured into a life that turned out to be a lie. Grieving a future that never existed is a strange thing. It feels like mourning a ghost you can't quite touch. But every day the grief grew quieter, and the peace louder. One evening, a message pinged on my LinkedIn. It was from Gloria, the HR director. Hope you're well, Natalie. Thank you again for the professionalism in how you handled things. You helped us address a significant issue. Wishing you all the best in your new role. I stared at the words for a long moment, then closed my laptop. I didn't need applause. I didn't need closure. I had something better, the knowledge that I had survived the fire without letting it burn me down. People expect revenge to be loud, fiery, explosive, but mine was quiet, surgical. I didn't orchestrate their downfall. I simply revealed the truth, then stepped aside. They built their own guillotine. All I did was hand them the rope, and then I walked away.